Oh, exactly. Stop recording, please. Thank you. Oh, yeah, we're good. Yes, Red Bull in full effect. Greetings, everybody. The talk you're about to see is Dropping Docs on Darknets, Identity Boogaloo. Basically, it's going to be about how people got caught using darknets, like Tor. And actually, pretty much all these stories involve Tor. I haven't known anybody caught on I2P yet, not because I2P is necessarily inherently more secure. There are some things about it that might be better, but because Tor is basically the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to darknets. So, a little bit about me. I run irongeek.com. You'll probably be visiting my website later on to see these videos, or you'll see them on YouTube, or you'll see them on archive.org. I have an interest in InfoSec education. I don't know everything. I'm just a geek with time in my hands, so if I get something wrong, let me know. There's a lot of stuff in these reports I've been reading through about various Tor users that got caught that I may get wrong, or I may get a couple people mixed up. So if I got something wrong, email me, let me know, come up to me after the talk, and we'll figure it out. Also, I'm a senior information security consultant at TrustedSec, and a co-founder of DerbyCon up in Louisville, Kentucky. Alright, I'll be taking two perspectives when I'm giving this talk. Those people who I want to stay anonymous, want to help out, let's say political dissidents and so forth in really, truly oppressive regimes, really, truly oppressed people. And that's part of the reasons that Tor was even invented in the first place, was that people in certain countries, people could communicate, express ideas without necessarily worrying about the government coming down on them. At the same time, those other people, let's say, child pornographers, I would certainly like to see de-anonymized and caught. So, I'm looking at this in both how people how avoid getting caught and how to actually catch people. So, sometimes I'll say, do this if you don't want to get caught, but I'm talking about someone who is a pedo. I'm not trying to actually help them, but the same way they got caught would likely catch someone else who's, let's say, a political dissident or something to that degree. Also, I'm not really a privacy guy. I'm just a guy who really likes, crypto and networking, and this is a combination of both of them. I have some weird belief systems as far as, privacy is concerned. But I just think the topic of darknets is interesting. Also, I am not a lawyer. I may say things that are wrong. Nothing I give here is legal advice. If there's such a thing as a soul, I think I have one, so I am not a lawyer. Are there any lawyers in the room? All right, good. My wallet's safe. All right. Another thing, if you go to these darknets, be careful where you surf. Some things you'll find like contraband, like, child pornography, is kind of my understanding of it is a strict liability issue. Having it on your hard drive at all, having possession of it all, is illegal. So you could be web surfing around like, oh crap, now I got child porn on my hard drive. What do I do? So, yeah, be careful where you surf. I definitely recommend probably turning off showing of images. If you're going to say, oh, this is a chan of some kind, let me go visit that. A chan is a certain type of image board. And there's a lot of legitimate stuff on chans, but there's some nastiness too. I know a guy, let's call him Mike. Yeah, Mike's the ticket. No, Bob. Bob was the ticket. Yeah, Bob's the name. Bob was doing research on anonymity networks and how to deobfuscate people. And on one of these chants, he saw that his article had been posted. So it was a picture of him sitting there having a beer, and then a little bit down the page was child porn. Kind of disturbing. Okay. If you saw my DEF CON talk, this is not going to be a complete rehash. Parts will be. Here's a few cases I took out of it, so I have room for other cases and to expand out the Silk Road case. A Harvard bomb threat was Eldo Kim, apparently. He got caught because he was the only person, or one of the few people on the network using Tor at the time, and when the cops asked him, was it you that sent the bomb threat? He admitted to it. He sent a bomb threat to a certain building so that he could, he was worried about a test he had to take, and he wanted to delay it. That was pretty much it. Also, they traced down his IP address. He used actually an anonymous mailer, but the IP address belonged to a Tor exit node, and then they looked up who all was using Tor on the network at the time, and they got him. LulzSec, not going to cover that in depth. Like all three of these, if you want to see them in depth, go check out the DEF CON version or the Show Me Con version of the talk. I'll have links later on in the slides and on my website. LulzSec basically got caught because Sabu, he used Tor most of the time, but one time he connected to the IRC service without Tor, and once he did that, people would be able to find his IP address. Once they had his IP address, they landed on him. Then they had him be an informant. He was talking back and forth to Jeremy Hammond. And because of things Jeremy Hammond said, even though he consistently used Tor, he said enough stuff about, getting arrested at this certain demonstration or where he was in the world that they could figure out there's only so many people with this skill set and these motivations. Let's land on this guy. Once they figured out it might be him, they started doing pin devices to see when he was connected. and eventually landed on him. Now, him, unlike some of them we'll mention later on, he was smart enough to get his laptop closed before the agents landed on him. And it was fully encrypted. Other people weren't as lucky as him. And Freedom Hosting, I don't know all the details of how they figured out who this guy was. I believe it had to do a lot with him having servers in his own name and the money trail for who was paying for him. Because while Tor might be hard to find a server inside the Tor network with a hidden service, if you do find it and that person is paying for like virtual hosting, or sorry, a VM someplace at some server farm, you can look through the records and he's paying dollars out of his own bank account. Doesn't take long to figure out who he is. Alright, those are the ones I'm not going to cover. Covered before. If you want to know more about those, check out the previous versions of this talk. A little background information, what a darknet is. There's a lot of definitions, but mine is an anonymizing private network. Basically a network you can be on and you can host services or access services and remain somewhat anonymous from the person you're accessing, and they remain somewhat anonymous from you. Generally they do this by use of encryption and proxies. Sometimes other peers automatically access a proxy, not necessarily. And this is used to obfuscate who communicates with who on the network. It's kind of like playing a game of telephone you did as a kid, where you'd pass a message along, but imagine the message was encrypted between each person. These are also sometimes referred to as cipher spaces. I like that term a whole lot. You also hear people refer to the deep web. Tor could be considered part of the deep web. The deep web is not necessarily Tor or darknet. The deep web is basically anything that's not surface level, easily indexed on something like Google. So technically, your corporate database that's behind a login would be deep web. Or a lot of information that Google has behind the scenes that you don't necessarily directly see would be deep web. But so would things like some items on Tor and I2P. So a little bit about Tor, the Onion router, just so people know about it. It was really started as at the U.S. Navy Research Laboratory, and it's now a 503c nonprofit. And I'll give you the reason why it was created by quoting them. Tor is a free software. It's free software in an open network that helps you defend against a form of network surveillance that threatens personal freedom and privacy, confidential business activities and relationships, and state security known as traffic analysis. And what you do with it? Well, you can access the public internet anonymously through it, or you can access what's known as a Tor hidden service. A Tor hidden service can be, we usually think of them as websites, but you could have an SSH server inside of Tor, and you'd be obfuscated from where exactly that SSH service is. There's also IRC servers out there you can connect to and chat anonymously, though there's ways you should really configure your IRC client to do that right. And the way it works is you connect to a local SOCKS proxy on your machine, and then that routes all your traffic out onto the Tor network. So, a few things to know about Tor. Layered encryption, bidirectional tunnels, so the way you send data out is the same way it's going to come back in. I2P, which we're not going to really cover much here, could have data going out this way, coming back in this way. Ways of obfuscating traffic analysis, which I'll explain more in a bit. It usually mostly focused on accessing the public internet, but now there's enough darknet sites out there and darknet markets that I'm not sure that statement's true anymore. And you want more information, go out to the torproject.org. But to give you an idea of how Tor works, let's say I want to send a message to a server. I have 3 levels of encryption. I talk to the directory servers, probably, and I get a list of different nodes I could jump through. I talk to a guard node, just my first node, and I talk to 2 other nodes at least, and I get their encryption keys. So I get like the public encryption keys, and I encrypt my message to where I want to send it using 3 different levels of encryption. The one for my first node hop, the one for my second hop, and the one for my third hop. And it's layered, kind of like Russian nesting dolls. So when I hit my first layer, it doesn't know where I'm going eventually, but it knows where to send it to next, and it unencrypts the first layer that it can unencrypt, and then sends it on to the next particular hop. Then that one gets it. It doesn't know where I came from. It doesn't know who I am, and it doesn't know who I'm speaking to either, but it knows how to unencrypt one layer of the nesting dolls, and then it can send the message on. Now the final, if this is an exit point, it can decrypt the final stage and then send it out to the public internet. He doesn't know who I am, but he doesn't know who I'm communicating with if it's on the public internet. And then that all just comes back through to me with the same layers of encryption added backwards. Now, a hidden service is a little different. It starts out and essentially Bob has a hidden service they want to put out there. Let's say it's a website. Let's say it's someone who wants to sell sprockets or Kinder eggs. Kinder eggs are contraband. We use Kinder eggs. This guy wants to sell Kinder eggs. It may not be completely illegal in the United States, so they decide to set up a Kinder egg auction site. So first of all, they set up some introductory points to build circuits to them. Then it advertises in the DB its onion address, and this is going to be some crazy set of characters, .onion. That particular address, some people can use tools to make part of the name significant, but mostly the .onion address is random. They advertise it in the database. Alice, she finds out that this exists. She wants to buy herself some Kinder eggs, so she requests more information from the database, and she also sets up a rendezvous point where communication will be done between her and Bob. Then at this point, Alice writes a message to Bob, encrypted using a public key, listing the rendezvous point and a one-time secret, and an introduction point delivered to Bob. I'm studying this all out. All right, Alice writes a message to Bob, encrypts with the public key, listing the rendezvous point and a one-time secret, and asks an introduction point to deliver it to Bob. Then Bob starts communicating with Alice over the rendezvous point. And communication is set up, and they can be anonymous. By the way, this is not just one hop. There's actually multiple hops in here. These green lines should probably be represented with more individual computers. But that's just simplifying the circuit for you. And so I believe, if I remember correctly, there's like at least 3 hops between each one of them before they even hit the rendezvous point. I believe. I could be off on that. Regardless, because it's hopping through all these different nodes and it's encrypted with different keys for each individual node, you can't really necessarily know who's talking to who easily. A little bit of terminology: a client is just a user. A relay is anybody who relays traffic. On Tor, you don't necessarily have to be a relay. You have to choose to be a relay. On I2P, by default, you're relaying traffic. Now, there's an advantage of being a relay in the case of I2P, because some of the communications going through you is not your communication. It's someone else's. So you kind of get lost in the stir of echoes of everybody's talking to each other. Bridges are relays that are not advertised in directory service. This is for when China does something like, oh, we're going to block the directory service so you can get on Tor. All right, here's some relays. Oh, sorry, here's some bridges. Let's go ahead and let people know about those bridges out there, and they can connect. So basically, you could email a certain email address, and they'll send you back just a couple bridges. But there's no universal collection of all the bridges. So it's hopefully impossible for a government to block all of them. You can request a few at a time, or maybe someone will set up a bridge, not tell anybody, and then just email it to a few friends inside the country, and then they can get out. Guard nodes are more trusted nodes that are put there for to mitigate some traffic analysis. One thing you don't want in any kind of Tor-like network is someone to control the first entry point and the last exit point, because at that point it becomes a lot easier to do traffic analysis and figure out who's who. Introduction points are helpful for making connections to hidden service, and rendezvous points are for relaying and establishing connections to hidden services. What does it look like? Well, it depends on how you have it set up. I highly recommend, if you're going to mess around with Tor, use Tor browser bundle at least, or go with something like Tails, which is a distribution of Linux that you can boot from a CD or boot from a USB, then pull out everything's in memory, leave nothing on the hard drive. It's probably the best way to do it. It also has firewalling configuration, so that in theory, it's not communicating with anything but Tor. So even if you deliberately tried to ping something else from Tails, it wouldn't go, because it wouldn't be able to do it over Tor. So the idea is it forces everything over Tor, and that becomes important later on, because some of these people got caught who wouldn't have got caught if they had been using something like Tails, or even if they'd been using the browser bundle more carefully. Here's a few cool applications and sites you go out there on Tor to visit. Tails is what I was mentioning before. It's basically a distribution of Linux, run it from a thumb drive, access various darknets. It has Tor and I2P built in, though I believe you have to use a certain boot flag to enable I2P. I2P screwed up at one point, and there was a way, because it had I2P on it, you could make I don't know if it was an iframe that accessed, it was kind of a cross-site request forwardry thing, where you could access something inside of I2P that was already running on Tails, and then make some configuration changes or whatnot, and be able to actually de-anonymize them. They fixed it since then, but I believe now you have to still use a boot flag to be able to enable I2P. It's off by default. Tor web proxy, I don't know if that one's even still up. These are like web sites on the public internet that'll proxy you into Tor without you installing Tor, the Tor browser bundle on your machine. There's the hidden wiki, which has a bunch of links off the different hidden sites. So if you want to say, all right, what's the current .NET marketplaces out there, this will tell you. Scallion, it's used for making special names for your hidden service. Like, let's say you don't want a completely random name. You want like Adrian's then something. You can use this to brute force at least the first part. I'd have to imagine there's security concerns there since you're basically taking out randomization, but I haven't done a lot of research on it. Oh, an onion cat, and it's kind of like netcat over an onion where you can route various types of traffic through Tor. And there's also Reddit Onions is a nice little website to check out to see what onions are popping up out there, because these sites come and go. Now, Tor has a lot of pros. If you can tunnel it through socks, you can generally get it to work over the network. And that 3 levels of proxying at each node is fairly secure. Downsides, it's always going to be slower than the public internet. You just gotta accept that. Also, it has a semi-fixed infrastructure. I think that's not 100% true anymore. I think they've added some other things to it. Like I2P, they use something called distributed hash table, so that there's no central point where the government go, all right, you're gone. As long as you have a few of those entry points, those nodes, they'll communicate the information to you. It's kind of like if you do torrenting and you're using a trackerless torrent, it exchanges information kind of the same way. So as long as a few of those nodes are up and you can connect to them, they'll distribute the information for you. So it's just kind of a self-healing network. A while back, China actually blocked the Tor directories, which caused some problems with Tor users in China. It's also fairly easy to tell if someone's using it. There's a simple DNS query you can do to see whether or not someone's coming from a Tor exit point. And I have code out there on my website for that. What it looks like probably doesn't matter too much for you right now, but if you're looking on your local machine, you'll probably see port 9050 and 9051 open. The 9051's for socks. If you're using the browser bundle, it should probably be using 9150 and 9151. That way you could have a permanent installation of Tor in the box and maybe doing a hidden service, but be able to use a Tor browser bundle for everything else and they won't conflict. And I got more details out there on my website on how to detect this. If you're actually sniffing the traffic, generally speaking, it's going to look like HTTPS. And there's actually projects out there that make the traffic look like some other protocol. Like I think there's one to make it look really like HTTP. I think there might be one for Skype. And the idea is sometimes not only do you not want people to know that you're using Tor, well, not only do you not want people to know where you're going, but also you don't want them to know that you're using Tor at all. And so there's been some work on obfuscating proxies that make your traffic on the Tor look like something different. Shout out to I2P. I'm not really going to be covering it much because I don't know of any major cases involving it. I know some people used it for malware once, but it's another similar darknet, though its whole focus is pretty much hidden service-like structures. Like they call them EAP sites. You can out-proxy to the public internet, but it's not really designed so much for that. Also, a quick note on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It basically works on a proof-of-work concept. The idea originally came about as a way of stopping spam. The idea was that, okay, new protocol we're going to add into SMTP or whatever is for you to send that email, you have to do a calculation that takes you 2 seconds to do, some kind of mathematical calculation. Now, if I'm sending a legitimate email, that's no big deal if it slows it down by 2 seconds. However, if some spammers sending out thousands and thousands and thousands, it greatly slows them down. Well, they use a similar concept. In some ways, it's a little bit like cracking a hash, where, you know, if it's a simple password, it may take you a little while to crack it doing brute force, but you know you eventually will. It's that kind of thing, and you have Bitcoin miners out there that have to keep solving more and more complex mathematical problems as time goes on to mine Bitcoins. And everything is kind of kept together in a big ledger that's distributed amongst all the Bitcoin users. And when you make a transaction, it goes out to the various other nodes, and you're the first person to make that transaction, and enough peers agree. It basically says, okay, this person owns this value. There's also things called tumblers, so when people are exchanging, they can keep exchanging back and forth between these tumblers and greatly confusing who's actually sending Bitcoin to who. And if you want to know way more about this is truth. There's lots of stuff about Bitcoin that I learn it for a minute, and then I forget about it, because it gets complex real fast. But Bob Weiss, who's, strangely enough, his wife is not named Alice, but Bob Weiss did a great talk on it a while back at B-Sides, Delaware, and I highly recommend checking it out. Okay, that gets us to some actual cases. First case I want to talk about is the Silk Roads. Now, someone going by the handle of Dread-Powered Roberts was operating the Silk Road, which allows sellers to buy and exchange less than legal goods and services, let's say. So here's part of a court document about some of the things that you can find on there. Cannabis, dissociatives, ecstasy, intoxicants, opioids, plenty of other fun stuff. You can also find various services like hitmen for hire, please hack this for me, can you get me some credit cards. It had a few things which you couldn't sell on it at one time, like sellers may not list forgeries of any private issued documents such as diplomas, certificates, tickets, or receipts. Also, listings for counterfeit currency are not allowed in the money section, though you were able to apparently order fake IDs. And these policies may have changed over time. That may have been just a snapshot. So, with about $1.2 billion in exchanges going through the Silk Road, the FBI really wanted to know who was behind this stuff. So they started looking into the earliest references to the Silk Road on the public internet. Now, but previous to this, the U.S. Postal Service had been noting an uptick in the number of drug packages coming through them. Silk Road even had instructions for how to properly ship drugs, so they would be less likely to be caught. I don't actually read those instructions, so something like maybe pack it in one plastic container, put activated charcoal around it, pack it in another plastic container, make sure everything's airtight, that sort of thing. But still, people were getting caught. So the earliest they could find as far as a mention of the Silk Road was on the Shroomery, and someone had posted a message to Shroomery talking about the Silk Road. And I don't think I can quite read this from here, so let me see if I can lean in and read it for you. I came across this website called Silk Road. It's a Tor hidden service that claims to allow you to buy and sell anything online anonymously. I'm thinking of buying off it, but wanted to see if anyone here had heard of it and could recommend it. I found it through silkroad420wordpress.com, which, if you have a Tor browser, directs you to the real site and does the address, which is kind of pseudo-random looking. And let me know what you think. And it was signed by a guy named Altoid. Well, he was the first person to ever mention it. Maybe Altoid is the guy they're actually looking for. And this is posted 1/27/2011. So, let's go forward. Also, there was a post on Bitcoin asking for some help with using about how Silk Road works. And also, eventually, there was a post on Bitcoin about wanting to find someone to help with developing it. Let's see. What an awesome thread. You guys have a ton of great ideas. Has anyone seen Silk Road yet? It's kind of like an anonymous Amazon.com. I don't think they have heroin on there, but they're selling other stuff. They basically use Bitcoin and Tor to broker anonymous transactions. It's at such and such address. Those not familiar with Tor can go to silkroad420wordpress.com for instructions on how to access the .onion site. So this was posted there, and also eventually someone started asking around for help and an IT pro who knew a lot about Bitcoin to increase the stability of the site. And someone posting again with the name Altoid, and strangely enough, signing his actual Gmail email address to it, rossulbrich@gmail.com. That's some pretty huge fail, since you're the first person who ever mentioned Silk Road online, and then you use the same handle and your real email address someplace else to ask about processing Bitcoin. Yeah, so he was kind of doomed from the start with bad OPSEC, but other things happened as time went by. If you start doing research on Ulbrich, you'd see that he had a big interest in the, I don't know how to pronounce this correct, right, but Mises School, Mises Institute of Economics. They basically have an Austrian school of economics where it's kind of a very, I don't say what, radical libertarian capitalist view. And if you see any posts by Dread-Powered Roberts, he would also talk about the same school and had a lot of the same interests. So you can see kind of a connection between the two already. Even if you just did research on Ross Ulbricht's public profile. Ross Ulbricht's signature on the Silk Road forums had a link to the Mises Institute. And he'd regularly talk about it on the forums on Silk Road. Also, the Ross Ulbricht account had posted to Stack Overflow asking for help with PHP code to connect to the Tor hidden services. And The username was quickly changed to Frosty later on, but initially he was asking for this help using his public, his real name. By the way, him changing it to Frosty kind of actually hurt him in some ways, which we'll see shortly. When they actually captured the servers, they found some code that he was actually asking about appeared on the servers. By the way, developing your own PHP stack, the guy was actually a fairly intelligent guy. I think he had a master's degree in materials engineering, but he was kind of a novice when it came to development and novice when it came to security, definitely operational security. He let all sorts of little breadcrumbs out there. And also developing a PHP stack and not getting it right, maybe not the best development language. One of the quickest ones he could get something up with probably, but it's real easy to screw things up. Anyway, he was asking for help. So guess who now is the suspect for Dread Pirate Roberts? That's the facial expression I would have after leaving all these breadcrumbs behind that the FBI could track him back on. All right, as I mentioned before, post offices started to receive a lot of packages with drugs in them. So Homeland Security created Operation Marco Polo, and we're going to start to look into this. The FBI was also looking into it as well. How much crossover there was between the two, I'm not sure how much communications. A lot of the work I've reviewed doesn't really state. A guy at the DEA, Carl Force, started going by the name Knob on the forums, and he claimed that, on the Silk Road forums, and claimed that his real name was Alado Guzman. And he didn't say he was a DEA agent. He basically tried to convince the people there that he was a drug dealer like everyone else. Well, a lot of the people at least. Pardon me. So, he infiltrated the Silk Road, pretending to be a drug dealer. And eventually, he had an encounter with this gentleman. Now, this gentleman is Curtis Green. And he went by the name Flush or Chronic Pain. He went by the name Chronic Pain because he actually did have some debilitating diseases, and he learned a lot about opiates to help alleviate those, because he had some legitimate medical issues, but I don't think he could get all the things that he thought he needed to solve his problems. So he became a drug enthusiast as far as pain relief is concerned. Well, he became eventually customer services on the Silk Road, so he had higher levels of access to the website than other people. Eventually, Dread Pirate Roberts demanded a scan of Green's driver's license to prove his loyalty. The idea being is, well, I know who you are, so you can now get this paid position with me. And I don't remember how much money Curtis Green was making, but he was a paid employee of the Silk Road. Well, eventually, DPR asked Green to help facilitate a transaction, basically be a middleman for a drug package. But the person that drug package was going to was an undercover agent, I believe Knob. So, in doing so, basically, Dread Pirate Roberts set up, not intentionally, Curtis Green to get caught. Because then, the DEA landed on Curtis Green, and apparently, according to the article I was reading, a puff of white powder covered him when he opened the package. I don't know if they said it to rig up a little explosion or what, but supposedly it actually had real drugs in it. The article was a little bit confusing. I'll link off to it later on. So, SWAT landed on him, and DEA took him in. And as soon as this happened, very shortly thereafter at least, Dread Pirate Roberts noticed the absence. So, okay, one of my main guys is gone. What's happening? Did a Google search, found out he'd been arrested. Okay, this isn't good. One of my guys, who has connections and admin access to some parts of my website, is now caught. And he also noticed that about 350 grand of bitcoins came up missing in Flush's name. This is not good. And that 350 went missing is interesting. We'll cover a little bit more about that in a second. Apparently, Carl Force, as I said before, he'd been pretending to be a drug dealer. And he got into places. And, well, when Dread Pirate Roberts noticed all that money was gone, he was like, well, this is my drug dealer friend, who's really a cop. Maybe I can get him to help with some muscle and get these coins back. It was actually Carl Force himself, by the way, apparently who embezzled that money. So in a way, Carl kind of put Green's life on the line there. But anyway, Dread Pirate Roberts contacted Carl Force, and who he thought was named Ilado Guzman, and said, okay, can you beat this guy up and try to get the coins back? Okay, if that's not working, can you kill him? So they staged a fake torture of Green, and I believe they eventually staged a fake death of him as well. Also, they found another admin that went by the name Cyrus who got turned as well. And as time went by, other people were also involved in the side scandal of this, because while Call Force helped lead to the capture of Ross Ulbricht, he also was doing various less than scrupulous things as far as stealing money and diverting it someplace else. And it wasn't like, it would be one thing if he stole the 350 and he kept it in some DEA account and the DEA know about it. My understanding is there was a lot of money he diverted that he'd never meant for the DEA to know about. He was going to keep it for himself. You know, Tarbell, he was one of the main FBI agents involved, Christopher Tarbell. Here's a quote he basically said about it. It's as if you found out at the end of Breaking Bad that Hank was dirty the whole time. So some of the good guys in this aren't necessarily all that squeaky clean either. So now they have an admin there, they're finding out more information, they're communicating with Russ Ulbricht and as Dread Pirate Roberts and figure out more information about him. Eventually, they also figure out where the server is, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But when they finally got the server, they found out someone was connecting the server from an internet cafe near where Ross lived in San Francisco. So instead of doing a lot of the admin work all over Tor, he would connect to it directly from an IP on the public internet. And some of the messages that people got on the Silk Road seemed to indicate from Dread Pirate Roberts, based on the times he was up and awake and so forth, that he lived in Pacific time. Though I've heard other reports from Alex Winters. You know him better as Bill from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He's actually did a documentary on this, and there are people who claim that they communicate with Dread Pirate Roberts at all sorts of different times a day, and that sometimes you get different answers from him for almost the same question, depending on what time of day. So some people suspect there was more than just one Dread Pirate Roberts. That's something that I can only speculate and cover more later on. He has, Alex Winters actually has a documentary that's called Deep Web, which is either out now or will be soon, I believe. I haven't seen it as of yet. Okay, also, IP of a Silk Road server was attached to be a VPN server that was connected to by an IP belonging to the same internet cafe on Laguna Street in San Francisco, for which Ulbricht had connected to a Gmail account with, both on June 3rd, 2013. So this goes something like this. Okay, I have this server, I have it captured, I see this public internet site is, I'm seeing it's being accessed from this public IP. All right, who, at this particular public IP, what else are they communicating with? Oh, they've been communicating with Gmail. If Gmail will turn over information to me, who all communicated with you? So you're adminning your darknet site over the public internet instead of using it through Tor, and you're using your Gmail at the same time. They were able to kind of tie that together as a piece of evidence. PMs to Dread Pirate Roberts from a user said that he was leaking some sort of external IP address information so people could actually figure out what server he was actually hosting on. And apparently there was also a Reddit thread, and I believe I found the Reddit thread they were referring to. And Christopher Tarbell, the FBI agent, also I believe saw this thread and went, oh, there's some kind of flaw on Silk Road that would tell me its actual IP address of the server. Well, here's what I do whenever I'm doing a pen test. I throw random crap at any kind of form field I get and see if I can make some kind of error happen. If I get an error message that tells me something about how the software is programmed, what the platform is, and may lead to all sorts of useful information. Usually, internal IP address information or public IP address information isn't that big a security concern, but when you're running a darknet site, yeah, it kind of is. So Christopher Tarbell just tried throwing various things at to create an error, and eventually he created errors that gave him a real-world IP address. When you look through everything and traced it back, there was this particular IP address that was hosted at the Ford Data Center in Reykjavik, Iceland, that had the same, well, when he went to the site, he saw this IP address, when he got an error, he went to that particular IP address, and a page came back that had the exact same captcha style as the Silk Road. So he thought, oh, this might be the Silk Road. When I did some research, I think it was 2011 or 2010, on I2P, one of the things I would notice is people would be selective on where they would serve a page to. For instance, you visited the IP address, if you visited the EAT site, you would get a certain page. However, if you requested that same EAT site name from an IP that you knew was on the I2P network, it would sometimes return you the same page. So you know who it was. So really, he should not have had this listening on, let's say, port 80 to the entire world. That was a bad idea, because all someone had to do was figure out the IP address they make a request to it and go, oh, this page matches something in the darknet. This is probably the actual true host. So anyway, FBI starts taking down Silk Road servers, and they had captured one of the servers and can get information off of it. I'm not quite sure completely what he threw out there to get that error message, but at least that's the story he said. I think, Rob posted something that there was some doubt about this. I need to do some more research. Anyway, they found the real IP address, and were able to get a copy of it and start looking at it. Now, another problem that Ross had is he kept a diary of sorts. Now, this was on his own laptop, which basically had all sorts of information in it about what was going on with the network. And once he actually captured this, that's a lot of self-incriminating stuff. But a few things that were going on while Silk Road was up was there was a protection racket going on to keep him from getting DOSed. That was, I think, they had to pay out like 50 grand a week. And apparently in May 2013, the site was actually down for a week because of various attacks. I think it was another dark market who was trying to web out the competition. 10 minutes? Okay, I better cook it. All right, user-friendly chemist also at one point apparently hacked another user's system and found a bunch of email addresses, and he tried to blackmail Dread-Powered Roberts about releasing those and demanded a whole lot of money. So Ross tried to hire Red and Wright to have the guy killed. Apparently Red and Wright was supposed to be a member of some biker gang that could do it. And the whole thing does sound a little bit like Breaking Bad. And they're supposed to kill various other people as well, but it appears that these murders probably never actually happened because they can't find the bodies and none of the names seem to match up with anybody that really went missing or died. So it's more than likely Red and Wright was trying to scam Ross Ulbricht. Also, the solid people he was having killed were scammers themselves. They were people who were like, say they were selling drugs, maybe sell some. Once they got a decent reputation, they'd take people's money and run. Which, that kind of behavior really doesn't make the Silk Road look good. So Ross tried to push back against that. Another thing that happened kind of led to Ross, Customs intercepted a bunch of fake IDs with his face on them, going to his place. So they went to buy, and then none of them had his name on it, his actual name on it. So they went to talk to him. Now the smart thing Russ did was, and this is a quote from some article I read, Ulbricht generally refused to answer any questions pertaining to the purchase of this or other counterfeit identity documents. However, the dumb thing he said was, however, Ulbricht volunteered that hypothetically anyone could go onto a website named Silk Road or Tor and purchase any drugs or fake identity documents the person wanted. Yeah, that wasn't the right thing to say. You come and ask me about illegal stuff, and you're saying, oh, here's a place you can buy all this stuff, and you happen to be the one that owns that site? Oh, by the way, roommates also knew him as Josh, not his real name. And previously, Dread-Powered Roberts on the forums had apparently indicated a desire, or in PM's desire, indicated a desire for some false identification. Oh, a little detail, when they confiscated the machine, they noticed that one of the SSH keys on it was for Frosty at Frosty. Well, remember before, he changed his Stack Overflow account name to Frosty. Another thing tying Ulbricht to the entire scenario. Eventually, on 10/1/2013, the FBI landed on him in the library right after he entered the password for his laptop. And they actually staged the fight behind him to do this. Because they had some experience because of one of the guys from HouSecCon, Jeremy Hammond, that Jeremy Hammond got his laptop closed. So what they did was stage a fight behind him. Ross Ulbricht's like, what the hell's going on? And another person snuck up and grabbed his laptop and moved it away from him while it was still unlocked. Once they got it unlocked, and they could go up and go open the web browser and see, oh, he's already logged in as Dread-Powered Roberts on the Silk Road. So he was busted. By the way, the funny thing is, he had been downloading the previous night the Colbert Report interviewing Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, just after the series finale. Go figure. When caught, Ulbricht supposedly said to Tarbell, I don't suppose 20 million can get me out of this. Yeah, I don't know why the hell he said that. Claim was made by Ulbricht's attorney that Ulbricht started Silk Road 1, but sold it off quickly. There's a few things maybe to lead this off, but he was obviously still involved by the end, so... one of the things that U.S. Attorney Aaron Turner said was there's no dispute when the defendant was arrested, he was logged in as the Dread-Powered Roberts. By the way, Ulbricht received a life sentence. Some of the stuff about murder for hire is still up in the air, but he's pretty much in prison for life. There's a lot more info in these particular articles, which I'll have the slides up there eventually when I post the video. Lessons learned. Keep online identities separate. Keep different usernames for different locations. If he hadn't used Frosty all over the place, he would have been a lot better off. Also, have a consistent story. Having your roommates not know you as one name, but other people know you as a different name, didn't look good. Also, don't talk about your interests because it ties things to you. And don't volunteer information. Like, why would you say, well, theoretically, you could buy that on the Silk Road? And also, don't keep a diary or log of your criminal activities on your laptop. If you closed the laptop fast enough, it would have been fine, I suppose, but yeah. Oh, next case I want to talk about. I actually have a few cases, and I don't know if I'll be able to get to them all. Tim DeFroggy, he was a former acting cybersecurity director for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Well, because of FBI Operation Torpedo, they had captured a pedophile site. And what they did was they added drive-by downloads to it that would inform them of who was actually visiting the page. I got more than 5 minutes. I got about like 9. Operation Torpedo. FBI Operation Torpedo, basically, they had the site they owned. They got it from somebody, and what they did was they started putting stuff on it to inform them when people visited. Basically, it wasn't exactly malware, but I believe they used something in Flash to actually identify them. Well, Tim was going by the name PT Ass Eater on this particular pedo book, and when he visited the page, there was a piece of Flash that ran, and it gave away who he was. We'll a little bit more into that in a second. See, Aaron McGrath's site had been seized and had been backdoored to deliver this drive-by malware. Now, the FBI was calling these things network investigative tools. And so a whole bunch of people who visited it, if they weren't using a secure browser, it would call back and tell the FBI what IP address they were actually coming from. So once they figured out it might be Tim, they found the IP address, they actually put like a pin capture device and found out he was using Tor. And his home IP address was used to access an AOL account as well called PT Ass Eater. That tied the two accounts together. And this little piece of malware would return the computer's actual IP address, the date and time the NIT had determined that the IP address was there, and a unique identified generated by the NIT, and as well as a series of numbers, letters, and special characters. Apparently it was based on Rapid7's decloaker. HD Moore had decommissioned this for a while because most people who visited from Tor browser bundle had already fixed things to where they couldn't be decloaked using these methods. However, it appears that Tim was not actually using Tor browser bundle. He tried to configure one himself. And he's a security guy, but he kind of screwed up. And Torpedo's little NIT actually used Java, JavaScript, and Flash to try to determine who was there. And what it would do is it would make a request outside the darknet and try to grab information, and you could see that request. For instance, what I've done before is I've taken a Word document, I've embedded an image that's actually on one web server I control, and then I look for any access of that image that's on my web server, and I can be pretty sure that person is the one who accessed my darknet site as well. So you download a Word doc from me on my darknet site, open it up in Word, Word all of a sudden doesn't know about the proxy settings, it reaches out on the public internet for that file, and I know who you are. If you want to see Decloak, it's out there on archive.org. Also, I think John Strand's team is working on making a newer version of it. Other types of malware like this have been out there before, like there was Magneto, which phoned home to servers in Virginia using a public IP address. You report things like MAC address and so forth. From some of the Snowden documents, there were things like Egotistical Giraffe, which was an awesome name for a piece of malware for tracking down people. And a few other pieces of malware as well. Joe Cicero has a talk, I don't know if you ever got it recorded, called Privacy in a Surveillance State, Evading Detection, which you should probably check out if it's online in your place. I have on me about almost 15 minutes to the hour. Is that? Where's the next speaker? Okay. Where's the next speaker? Okay. Make a hidden server contact you over the public internet. So basically, you have a payload or exploit. Just be connecting to a remote box and just have it basically shove a shell back at you. Or you can deliver some content to somebody, and if it has an exploit in it or it somehow doesn't request things over Tor, you can figure out what the public IP address is. Another interesting thing with Tor if you don't configure it correctly, there's DNS leaks. There's ways you configure it where it does the DNS over your public internet access instead of storing it over the proxy. You actually, in Firefox, have to manually set it to use the proxy for DNS. So while your ISP may not know that you're going to the Silk Road, or they don't know the content you're sending to the Silk Road, since you're making a DNS request for the Silk Road, they might know that. The Tor browser bundle is automatically configured properly, so that does not happen. So it sends everything, all DNS entries or requests, over the network itself. So lessons learned from Timothy Froggy: don't be a pedophile. Use the browser bundle, and make sure you keep it up to date, because some other previous people from another case I was talking about, if they had used the Tor browser bundle that had been updated, they would have been okay, but they were using an old version of it, which had an old version of Firefox with it, and that one was prone to a particular vulnerability. Also, don't open up Flash and Word docs, or HTA files, or most anything almost. Another good reason to use Tails, because it automatically has firewall settings to keep connections outside of Tor from going anyplace. Now this one I won't have time to cover. This is on Silk Road 2. So I'm basically nothing. Alright, in that case, I'm going to fast forward to this, and I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll talk about this guy maybe at a future talk. In hindsight, I should have covered Tor less, and more about the cases, but I want people to have a background in that. We'll get to the goodbye slides. Oh, a little bit about this guy, how he screwed up. I'll tell you that. Don't connect your name to anything. If you're running a hidden service, don't pay for the service in your own name. Trust no one. For instance, if you have your initial conversations about starting Silk Road 2, don't trust a lot of other people, because one of them might actually be an FBI agent and get in there from the ground start. Use the Tor browser bundle. And don't buy flashy stuff like buying one of those high-end electric cars like a few months after you start the Silk Road 2. And be paranoid about downtime. It might mean the FBI is imaging your stuff. Oh, a bunch of side articles. I'm going to post these slides later on. I have a bunch of stuff like links to my original talk that covered different cases. A bunch of articles on Tor and I2P. ADHD Linux. These are the people who are trying to recreate various things like Metasploit Decloaker, and announcement about DerbyCon. Dates are September 20th, 26th, 2016. And I would say questions, but I'm already supposed to be kicked off the stage. So I thank you all very much for your time.